For those who are joining us for the first time, we say welcome you. It's amazing to have you here. And those who have been here before, we ask you we welcome you back once again. It's going to be another amazing service. I'm just going to run through a few ground rules for today's service, just as we're going. I'll be the MC for today. My name is Pami or Pamilari, the full name, because I know Nigerians like to pronounce the full name, so it's Pamilari. Just a few ground rules as we go about the session. When the guest speaker is speaking, please have your mic on mute to stop any background noises and to stop any distractions. If you have any questions, please note them down. And once the guest speakers finish speaking, there'll be a section after they're finished for you to ask your questions. And if you're watching live from Facebook, please, you can send in your questions via our direct message, and someone here will organize me asking your question for you. Yes, and once the question is going on, I'll be just when the time is there, I'll let you know now is the time for questions, and you can just simply signify by raising your hand in the emojis. If you look on the bottom right, there's 3 dots. If you click those 3 dots, you'll see there's a button that says raise hand. So once it's time for the questions and I give the go ahead and you've noted your questions down, I'll say, okay, now you can raise your hands, and I'll be picking people in an orderly fashion to ask their questions. So I hope you enjoy. I'll be passing it over to Dr. David now, who will be welcoming everyone and our guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bamilerin. The Lord bless you. I would like to welcome everybody once again to this month webinar, and especially I'd like to welcome very warmly my dear friend, Professor Bolaji Owasonye, SAN. Your presence again on this platform is an eloquent testimony to your character, and I really, really appreciate it. I'm not going to take it for granted at all. And I also want to extend, warm welcome to my dear sister, your wonderful wife, Mrs. Funsho Owasonye. I imagine if she's not yet on the platform, that she's likely to join. And then for those who of all who are already online, we say welcome to you. Thank you for coming, and it's going to be another great and brilliant session together. And for those who are joining us for the first time, you are most welcome. We do this regularly every month, and oftentimes it's the 3rd Saturday of the month that we do these. So you are most welcome. Just a little thing about the initiative, this initiative, for those who are joining us for the first time. We are a group of Christians, but who believe passionately that leadership is very crucial. But of course, we know that leadership is very wide. So we've chosen to concentrate just on 3 areas. That's leadership in the church, leadership in governance, and leadership in business. And today, the session today, our facilitator today, Professor Owasonye, will be talking about leadership, particularly in the area of governance. So I know that it's going to be a beautiful, wonderful session. And so just get yourself prepared. And we're also glad to let you know that by the grace of God, the initiative is moving slowly but steadily into other parts of Europe. It's been embraced, and it's a pleasure. We give glory to God for that is happening within the short time that, we started. As a matter of fact, my brother and colleague will be taking the session of introducing the guest speaker today. That's Pastor Sam Olumide Shiwoku. He is the lead person for this initiative in the Republic of Ireland. And the person who will be taking the vote of thanks, Pastor Carl Chipley, is the lead person for the initiative in Switzerland. So I will get to meet other people, in subsequent months at subsequent seminars. So we thank God, that, the vision is catching on. And of course, if you notice, those of us who have been part of this for a couple of months, we started something a couple of months ago whereby we also give time for people, who are doing, who have brilliant things out there, and who are doing something that we know it's important for people to get to know about. We've introduced a few people in the past, and today again, you're going to have one of our wonderful friends and pastor, Pastor Ayobami Olunloyo, who will be speaking about, a brilliant initiative. I stumbled on it through him, incidentally, and so he'll be speaking to us after the presentation and after the Q&A, just a brief session. He will be speaking to us much later. So that is about how things, will, go today. So by the grace of God, next month, again, we're going to be meeting third Saturday, the 28th of August. And the focus next month is on leadership in business. That's Christian leadership in business, or leadership in business. And Professor Francis Boake-Mensah will be delivering that for us. He's a professor of business at University of Ghana, and he'll be delivering that for us. He's been a friend of this initiative from the very beginning, and we thank God that the Lord has blessed us with wonderful, kind-hearted, resource people. So that is briefly what we have today. Well, once again, I want to welcome each and every one of us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your presence. And so I'll just quickly, hand over now to my friend and colleague, Pastor Sam Olumide-Shiwoku, to give us the introduction. Over to you, Pastor Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. We thank God for your life and the great initiative for this project. We are all welcome, and we thank God for the life of our guest speaker today. Due to his schedule, he still find time to be with us today. So please, before I give brief introduction of our guest speaker, I want to encourage us, if you are yet to share this platform, please go ahead and do that so that many people will benefit from the wealth of knowledge of our guest speaker today. Please quickly do that. And I will quickly just take us along the journey, the short profile of our guest speaker today. Once again, it's a great privilege for me from the Republic of Ireland to be the one to introduce our guest speaker today. And our special guest speaker for our webinar today, as we have heard from Dr. Akomolafe, is Professor Bolaji Owasoye, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, SAN. Professor Owasoye is a human rights activist who currently serves as the chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, the first and pioneer anti-corruption and integrity institution in Nigeria. Before his appointment, he was the executive secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption in Nigeria. Professor Owasoye is a co-founder and the executive director of the Human Development Initiative, HDI, a not-for-profit and consulting organization. Together with other leading organizations, HDI implemented the Stop Impunity Nigerian campaign, focusing on eliminating impunity in public finance management. Professor Owasoye is an ordained reverend, and he was for many years the assistant chaplain at the University of Lagos Chapel of Christ Our Light, and presently a member of the clergy at the Aso Villa Chapel in the State House, Abuja, Nigeria. Please join me to welcome once again Professor Bolaji Owasoye, SAN, as I now hand over to him for his presentation. Over to you, sir. Bless you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
If you can hear me.
We can hear you
loud and clear, sir. Okay, thank you very much. My internet is a bit erratic. Somewhere I'm on my way out of the country. The official trip came after I had committed, so I tried to manage the process by not canceling the event. So I leave from here to the airport. So I'm going to make this concise. I want to thank Pastor Akomolafe, my friend and brother, and the entire group for inviting me a second time to fellowship with you and to share my thoughts on this thorny issue of leadership. I've chosen to speak on governance and the public service in Nigeria, a leader's dilemma. I chose the topic because of my own experience coming from academics into government, and of course, having to work with the team that I met on ground in my office. And I'm not able to deal with infractions, except, of course, by going through laid down procedures. This itself is a safeguard against tyrannical leadership. But there are many other challenges and issues around leadership and those you have to work with in order to achieve set goals and objectives. The whole notion of governance is at the center of orderly societies. Societies that are organized always have structures that are credible for governance, and it serves the purpose. Indeed, Nigeria's 1999 constitution, as amended, underscores the importance of governance by saying that the National Assembly, for example, would have powers to make law for peace, order, and good government of the country, or any part thereof. So, if the responsibility of the legislature is to make laws for peace, order, and good government, it's clear what the key intention of governance, according to the framers of the Constitution, will be. Section 14.2 of the same Constitution says that the security and the welfare of the people will be the primary purpose of government. In other words, the whole essence of government is to secure and make the people comfortable and see to their well-being. So governance remains the center point of the constitutional duties of public officials, whether they are elected or appointed, because the laws that are made by the legislature are for good government. The executive must implement them towards that end and objective. And of course, the judiciary must also act purposively in a way that leads to good government. This is very important, and I'm going to speak a bit about this as we proceed. Governance, especially good governance, as a concept, has universally acceptable basic features around it. How would you know if your form of government is good or is an aberration? One, it must be geared towards poverty alleviation. A governance structure that does not diminish poverty within the system has to be reassessed. It must be designed towards security of life and property. It must be designed towards maintenance of law and order, and it must be designed towards an acceptable level of infrastructural development. You cannot. The system must continue to be proactive and forward-looking. So this implies that governance must be geared towards addressing these issues in the very minimum. Now, key notable global institutions have defined governance in different ways. The World Bank, for example, says it is the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development. Take note, the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development. Look at the UNDP. It says governance is the exercise of economic, political, and administrative authority to manage a country's affairs at all levels, and the means which states promote social cohesion, integration, and ensure the well-being of their population. These are very important keywords. the exercise of economic, political, and administrative authority to manage a country's affairs at all levels, local, state, national, subnational, and the means which states promote cohesion, integration, and ensure the well-being of the population. The EU defines it as the rules, the processes, and the behavior by which interests are articulated, resources are managed, and public regulatory powers are exercised in society. If we look at these three definitions, very, very seminal definitions of governance, we can deduce that governance is central to the management of resources, and that function is exercised by the public service. It's critical that governance is central to the management of resources. If your salary as the head of a family is $1,000 and you have to pay school fees, rent, and all that, you must manage $1,000 in such a way that it meets the needs of the family. This is what we're being told. Now, I do a quick definition of the word civil service or public service, which I use interchangeably for the purpose of this conversation. Section 318 of Nigeria's constitution defines the public service in wider terms than the civil service. The public service is defined to cover service in any capacity in respect of the federal or state government, while the civil service covers service in a civil capacity, most notably bureaucracy of government only. So the purpose of this distinction is for us to know who are those who are recognized as people employed within the public or the civil service. And this covers public service, for example, will cover other sectors of the federal or state system, such as academics, statutory corporations like NNPC, public authorities like FAN, agencies of government. So you will not call somebody who works in the university as a civil servant. Is a public servant. Who works in a public institution like the University of Lagos or the Obafemi Awolowo University or what have you, or any of the public universities, they will be public servants, not civil servants. But somebody who works in a core ministry will be regarded as a civil servant. But they are broadly covered by the same rules, largely with minor distinctions. Workers in the public service have their employment regulated by the respective regulations of their agency and also the public service rules. So, for example, in my office, the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, we're independent and we have our own rules. We have our own staff regulations, but we have designed them in such a way that they are not too far apart from the public service rules that governs the core civil service and other public service agencies. So there are enhanced benefits and opportunities and rules that we've put in there because of the peculiarity of our job as a law enforcement agency, the hazard of the job, for example. So we have things there to mitigate the negative effect of this. But we have ensured that the principles that we have covered are not too far away from the general public service rules. So every public service institution is expected to align their internal regulations with the public service rules that governs the core civil service and many of the, and this is also to avoid disaffection within the public service, whereby people will say, are we not working for the same government? Some people are generously benefited and others may not be. Workers in the civil service have their own employment regulated by the public service rules simpliciter, whether they are in federal or the state level. So in summary, what can easily and safely be described as falling within the purview of the Constitution as a public officer. This is safe. However, I noted that we have had some aberration in judicial decisions, whereby, for example, a governor of a state has been said not to be a public servant. The ICPC prosecuted a governor, a former governor, after he left office, because while in office, he has immunity. And the court had the temerity to rule that he is not a public officer. and that he is not caught within the contemplation of the Constitution. We have appealed, and we're at this by the Supreme Court. But it tells you that you cannot take and should not take anything for granted in Nigeria. Anything can happen. Strange decision indeed if someone is paid with public funds, but there we are, we're stalled for the moment. What are the common governance and administrative weaknesses that pervade developing countries? Bearing in mind the definitions that I picked from the World Bank, the UNDP, and the EU about governance being about the management and application of resources for the people or for public good, we find out that developing countries have a common anomaly that prevents us from maximizing and applying this principle the way that it is intended or contemplated. The first is low capacity, the quality and the type of. And I'm going to be very specific later on when I look at peculiar things that are dogging the Nigerian public service, because this is what I experience and my daily frustrations, if I may use that expression. Personal capacity.
Brazil, can you get in touch with Professor Wasonye, please?
Yeah. In the meantime, please just remain patient. And you can use this time to even maybe think of any questions that you may have while we're just trying to get back in touch. But we'll have it sort of very, very soon. Thank you.
Please bear with us. Professor Wasonye is trying to change, to a better suited data. Sorry about this.
Please confirm if you can hear me now.
We can hear you, sir.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I
Yes.
apologize for the...
Can it be louder, please?
Okay, let's see. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you, but the volume is low.
Oh, I've increased. Okay, let's see. Maybe it's from my... is it better? Is it better?
Yeah, it's better.
Well,
sir.
Is it better
not really,
in terms of...
Not really.
Some people are saying it is better. Dr. Akomolafe says not really. Maybe Dr. Akomolafe's device needs to be checked out.
Okay.
Can you please put back my slide?
It's loud and clear.
Thank you very much, sir. Can you go to slide number 5 or 6? Slide 6. The next slide. I was talking about performance evaluation, that developing countries are very low on organizational evaluation and accountability mechanisms. If you don't ask people to explain why things happen under their watch, as many people have read recently from Nigeria, there was a prison break, and so far nobody has been fired. So we have this challenge with organizational and accountability mechanisms. And there are written parameters, measurement tools, global, that try to evaluate our country's performance. The one I'm showing is the Chandler Good Government Index. And it rates Nigeria at 102, just ahead of 2 countries. If things continue to drift, Nigeria may just be 104. Granted that it doesn't cover all the countries in the world, but if it covers 100 countries and over 100 countries, and we can feature at number 102, it shows that governance is not moving well. If you look at the next slide, please. If you look at the next slide, it indicates some of the things that are evaluated in the measurement: leadership and foresight, robust laws and policies, strong institutions, financial stewardship, an attractive market, your influence globally, and how you help people to rise. Does the system create opportunities for people to realize their potential and all that? And all of these are rated. Now, even if you have a good leadership, you have the right laws, you have institutions. If your public service is weak, your institutions can surely not be strong. You have a huge population and a robust economy and a big market. If, again, you don't have the public service to make sure that that market adds value, if you have the potential for global influence and reputation because you are well endowed in natural resources, you have a huge population, you are strategically located on the global map, still, if you don't have the right kind of people to help harness all this, your rating will be poor. And then what do you do to help people to rise? People graduate from school, or people suffer calamities or health challenges. How does the system respond? These are the things that are ranked by the Chandler governance. The next slide, please. Very quickly, I then go to the public service as a mirror of government and the government as a mirror of the public service. That's what I mean by public service as mirror of government and vice versa. Irrespective of the type, the character, or the ideology of the government, one constant variable is bureaucracy. Every government has a bureaucracy because you have to govern through the bureaucracy. It doesn't matter what you want to do, you need the public servants to make sure that this is done. Now, all governments and political systems, whatever their typology, whether liberal or repressive, they need an administrative structure to manage resources and propagate the ideas of the government. So whether it is capitalism, welfarism, whether it is democratic, whether it is military, it is a despotism, you need people to propagate whatever is the political ideology of that government. That represents your bureaucracy and your public service. So the public service is critical to government and its ability to deliver services effectively. The type, the character, the ideology of government influences the character of its bureaucracy and vice versa. So if you look at Nigeria's public service, for example, I did some kind of analysis. Nigeria's public service and its character is deeply rooted in its political economy, its history, and the type of government that Nigeria has experienced. The most dominant, of course, being military character. Okay, the military characteristics has dominated and impacted how people respond. When you go to a typical ministry and they treat you as if take what they say or leave it. Okay, because this is what it was under military government. It was repressive. You could not question anybody. Even though we've been in civil government now for over 20 years, yet we have not come out of it. You apply for a simple thing like a license or a passport. Somebody behaves as if they are doing you a favor. Even when that somebody is not within Nigerian territorial premises, when they are abroad as diplomatic posting, the attitude hardly changes. It's because the service has been impacted by the type of government, and the type of government impacts the service. So the government is civil, but not necessarily democratic in experience and actions. It demonstrates a pervasive military mentality due to long spell of military rule and a predominantly unitary constitution pretending to be federal. It's only in Nigeria that you have a federal constitution that situates 3/4 of the things that drive development and puts it within the purview of the federal government. A natural resource is found somewhere, but to get permission to exploit it, you go to the federal government, who may not have the foggiest idea or any emotional attachment as to how this natural resource will impact your environment. A mixed economy, partly controlled and partly market driven. So on the one hand, you say you want to allow market forces to drive things. On the other hand, you fix prices, like the price of petroleum. The price of petroleum is fixed, and there's a subsidy that is benefiting some few people, but there it is. That's the evidence, a good sign of the mixed economy. You want to provide power, but you don't want consumers to pay the cost of generating, transmitting, and distributing power. How is that going to work? So you are subsidizing it. You have weak institutions of state at federal, state, and local government levels. This very phenomenon is responsible for why everybody thinks that if they do not leave their local communities, they will not get anything done. So it fuels rural-urban migration. You have weak and decaying infrastructure. You have situations whereby people have bought land, built houses before somebody starts thinking of building a road. And so when they start building roads in a highly urbanized setting, you can imagine the punishment that those who live on that axis will face, the discomfort and the inconvenience. Then you have a monoproduct economy that is volatile to external shocks. Until recently, Nigeria depended solely and only on oil and nothing more. I hope you can still hear me.
Yep,
we can.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. So we have a situation whereby Nigeria depends on a single product to drive her revenue, which is oil. But oil is extremely volatile to external influence and shocks. And so when anything happens there and there's a sneeze, Nigeria catches cold. Then, of course, there's division across fault lines within the public service itself and within government. And we can see it being expanded and illuminated because this is the season of politics. We have fault lines across ethnic, religious, social, economic, and cultural lines. And when it pleases those who want to exploit, they use whichever pleases them. Even in the fight against corruption, we find this many times where people would follow suspects to court in uniform attire called Ashwebi. They will write petitions, they will hold press conference and say, is he the only one? They are not saying he didn't do what you have alleged. They are saying, why is he the one you are prosecuting? And then, of course, you have a selfish and inattentive middle class. A middle class that does not think ahead and hardly participates. This is what we're trying to deal with. Furthermore, on the character of government, next slide, please. You have very weak commitment to social development, to health, to education, and to social security. I mean, for example, if there had been attention paid to education in the northern part of the country before now, surely the kind of challenges we're facing with religious extremism and insecurity emanating largely from the northern part of the country would have been diminished. But the leaders in the north have admitted that they dropped the ball over time. And so it's become very difficult. You have created a whole army of people who don't see a future for themselves within the system. So there's a very weak commitment to social development. There is no social security. If you are unemployed, you're unemployed. There have been a lot of ideas mooted about providing funding. Even health insurance doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. So you have this weak commitment. Widespread poverty fueled by corruption and long-term misgovernance. Corruption has weakened the institutions of state, and systemic and endemic corruption continues to prevent rapid reforms. It resists changes, it resists application of the laws, and because the corruption has benefited a few, they have been so well resourced that some of them are stronger than state institutions, and they can manipulate and resist state institutions. So that leads me to the next point about the rule of law and the administration of justice being very weak. It is highly manipulable, in spite of the fact that we have rules of procedure that time binds some kinds of cases. For example, corruption cases, for example, cases on AMCON recovery, that's the asset management company, on failed banks and what have you. Yet, some people successfully violate it, and the courts allow them to, whereas the rules are clear. The only exception are political cases. So, whereby the rules say cases must be completed within 3 months. So, all of the contentious that arose from party primaries, from elections, they are quickly dealt with within 3 months. So, which tells us that if they can deal with these cases, political cases, they can surely deal with other cases that are of critical importance as well. But you find a corruption case, by the time the case is over, the prosecutor is tired, the court is tired, the only person who is happy is the defendant who gets away, witnesses are tired, and all that. And you spend much more than is required to for the cases. The system is short on visionary and focused leadership, top to bottom and bottom up. The dysfunctional system is highly prone to manipulation by politically and economically powerful people. I already mentioned that. Insurgency and instability is fueled by rise of political Islam and restive regional activists like IPOP, Niger Delta Avengers, Oduduwa Republic agitators, etc. And this makes the service, that's the public service, vulnerable to these fault lines. because people will then do an analysis and tell you that, oh, look at all the permanent secretaries, they are from one part. Even when they are well spread, they can say, oh, all of them are from Lagos Central. Even though Lagos is represented, oh, they say Lagos West is not there, or Lagos East is not there, or this part of the state is not there. They can always break down the application of fault lines to micro levels. Then you have the rapid expansion of the public service. At the federal level, due to the proliferation of MDAs, and at the state level, due to state creation, which has had more of a negative than positive impact as it thinned out quality and competence of the public service. So, for example, when new ministries and new agencies are created, the people who staff them from scratch are moved from existing ministries. Now, in some of those existing ministries, the people who move quickly to go and head other agencies, they have not been well acculturated. They are not well qualified to head other agencies, so they cannot provide leadership. In the same vein, when states were created, for example, Oyo State was carved into two, and Osun State was created out of Oyo State. The people who went to start the service in Osun State moved from Oyo State. Some people will suddenly become permanent secretaries, some people will become directors because the new state. And once they were not well primed for the positions that they have taken, they are not able to devolve the capacity that is necessary beneath them. And so the service may end up with these mediocre public servants. And so we find that the creation of states, which required new states to have staffing from existing states, created its own challenges and diminished the quality of people available. It is like since Nigeria allowed and legitimized the establishment of private universities, one of the biggest concerns is the quality of staffing at private universities, because it takes time to make a good academic, besides the fact that the rules say you must study and earn a PhD. And so people who are not qualified to become professors in established institutions will move to new academic institutions, and they go and become professor with a few papers, some that are not even peer-reviewed and published. And so you have this expansion that thins out the quality of personnel. Then you have the wrongful application of the federal character principle. The federal character principle itself is not the problem. Affirmative action is useful for inclusivity, for a sense of belonging, for building social cohesion. But when it is misapplied, it creates its own problem. And this is the challenge that we have in the country, that federal character principle is misapplied. And then, of course, you have corruption, which I will not say much more because I'm still going to devote 1 or 2 slides to it. So the next slide, other peculiar governance problems within Nigeria's public service, which are peculiar and particular to our situation. Tribalism, which engenders nepotism and affects the work culture. For example, people are sometimes irrationally posted because it is believed that certain ministries are very juicy and certain positions are juicy. So you find people lobby. If suddenly the Minister of Petroleum is from your part of the country, then you lobby to be posted to the ministry because you think that, oh, they have a lot of allowances or they enjoy certain privileges without regard to the concomitant competence that is required. So you also have the politicization of the appointment of permanent secretaries. People will come and say, oh, there's no northern minority amongst the permanent secretaries appointed. Minority groups have been excluded. All the PSs from various states are from the majority tribes and all that. What about allowing people to compete so that whoever emerges is the best and is the one allowed? So all of these fault lines are played up, and it affects the quality of people you find in the public service. You have political appointments that do not fit purpose. All over the world, there are political appointees. I mean, this is not the problem. It is not evaluating the character and the fitness of the people appointed for purpose. So you find in most parastatals, and agencies of government. Promotion exercises are conducted by the governing boards or the leadership or the management of those institutions for officers beneath them. But if the people you have appointed as board members are half educated, some of them have no formal education, and they have to conduct promotion exams, and they have to set the questions for professionals and graduates. How on earth are they going to do it? Of course, they can outsource it. They can outsource it, but they must have sufficient experience and understanding that, oh, we don't have the capacity to set exams for professionals. We will outsource it. And these are the parameters under which. So you find that many MDAs, there are minor civil wars going on because of fitness for purpose, lack of understanding of the reason why they are there, and because they demand privileges that they do not deserve and that the law has not given to them. Then you have the influx of personal assistants and special assistants of public politicians. Usually every 4 years, new politicians will come into office. They will come with SAs and PAs. And often when they are going, sometimes in order to ensure that somebody is left behind to watch their back, they will orchestrate and give positions of authority to the people they have brought in. So they will elevate them rapidly and put them in positions that they are not trained for, and they undermine the structure and the institutional memory that is within service. So somebody who's been marking time, studying the system, is qualified to be a director. This minister does not want to go because he feels that once he goes, some of the atrocities he's committed will be exhumed. He wants to leave somebody behind to watch his back. So they orchestrate that the system will absorb these people that they brought in and all that. Of course, part of their argument for bringing people in is exactly why we're having this conversation. The capacity and the quality of the people they met on the ground. Many ministers and politicians and political would argue that the people they met there, if they are going to achieve anything, it's impossible for them to do anything. And there's some merit in that observation, at least going by my own experience now. Okay, you have to take your time to look for the talents within the system. But if you are going to look for those who are qualified within the system through those who are not qualified, they hardly will tell you who is a talent lying dormant somewhere, because those people will overshadow them. So it's a catch-22 situation at the end of the day. Then you have overstaffing, occasionally inevitable bloated wage bill and misalignment of budget. Virtually everybody knows that the public service is replete with a situation whereby 10 people are potentially available to do what one person can do. And so they have to create jobs for people. It used to be that at one time, when you are traveling domestically, when they used to do airport tax, I complained, I wrote letters and all that. Somebody will stand somewhere only to collect this tax from you and tear the paper. That's all. That's his job. And that's maybe a level 8 or level 9 officer. Meanwhile, this tax would have been added to the cost of purchasing ticket, and then it is debited to the tax authorities. So we don't need, so for me to be, the airline will not carry me if I don't pay the tax. Add the tax to the cost of the ticket, deduct it and pay inland revenue or whoever you want to pay. I get the ticket I bought, but they put somebody there at the gate. Now, not only myself, many people started complaining because sometimes there will be a queue for us to board, waiting for somebody just to tear. I even said, you are even increasing the cost of travel because you have to print this ticket that is totally unnecessary. But the system is overstaffed because the public service remains the main avenue for employment that people see. So even when it doesn't require more staffing, they create artificial positions where the person is virtually redundant. And that's why sometimes people don't even show up at work except to collect salary and they disappear. When I was appointed executive secretary at the Presidential Advisory Committee, I inherited the Presidential Advisory Committee secretariat, which had some staff. And I met with all the staff, but there was a particular fellow I never met. The first day that I had a meeting with them, they said, oh, he was not around. So I accepted that. And then I noticed that the second time I had me, he was not around. So I said, this guy is never around. Apparently, he just stays in Nasarawa State there, collects a salary, doesn't show up. So I then said, this cannot go on. This guy will not get paid at the end of this month. The next day, of course, his friends told him. The next day, he suddenly showed up. I said, who are you? I thought he was a visitor. He said, oh, he's a so person. He's the one I asked for. And he just doesn't come to work. And there are many ministries, they get salary, but they do nothing. Job competence, fueled by an epidemic of fake appointments with fake certificates. At ICPC, we are investigating almost 500, if not more, cases of people who promise others employment and they take money from them. And sometimes they would generate fake appointment letters and give to them and tell them to resume in ministries. We are prosecuting quite a few. Tell them to resume in ministry. The person they report to will assume that it is a genuine appointment and sometimes will absorb them in. Then they'll try and bribe the payment system, the people who are in the integrated personnel payroll system, to illegally integrate them. So government has not approved the employment of people, but the wage bill has been going on. And so right now, as I'm talking, there's an audit that is going on of who has been properly employed and who has not been properly employed. But that it can happen at all tells us what the challenge is. The second thing, of course, is genuine appointment with fake certificate. People would apply for positions with certificates they have not earned. As I said, because the system is not fully digitized, somebody can bring a certificate from University of Lagos, University of Ibadan, Ahmadu Bello University, and all that. Sometimes they are so entrenched that when you request that the institution should confirm, they would have primed the people who will receive the letters of response. And sometimes, and we have seen this happen in my office, whereby we've investigated fake certificates, and first time we will get a reply saying, oh yes, this is confirmed, because the agent of the person or the fake certificate was even generated through a syndicate in that institution. And you will get other petitioners to say, look, we know that this guy did not graduate from there. We go back again. This time, sometimes I delegate an officer who goes physically, not to see one person, but to see different people, in order to be sure that what we are getting is genuine. The absence of digital records, which facilitates record manipulation for illegal tenure extension. The standard is that you spend 35 years in service or you are 60, whichever comes earlier, you leave. But because some people feed fat on the public service, when they rise within the system and they have access to their own personnel records, I mean, imagine if you are director of administration and you are due to retire in 2 years or 3 years, you get your own file and substitute your personnel records, your age will suddenly increase or reduce, beg your pardon, and you add a few more years to it, or you add a few more perks to your records of service so that you can take undue advantage. This can happen because the records are not digitized, and so people can manipulate their own records. And in the absence of institutional memory in a system whereby those who know the way it works exit the system quickly, then of course they get away with it. We have cases again that we are prosecuting in ICPC of people who manipulated their own records. Then we have poor work environment, which kills morale and demotivates. No electricity, no water, toilets not functional, no computers to work with. The computers are old, are malfunctioning. This is general. This is general. Of course, sometimes when you look at the records, every year the ministries appropriate to replace the computers, to upgrade them, to send people on training. The money gets spent, but the infrastructure does not get delivered. Absence of adequate and continuous capacity development, with new methods and innovations being discovered all over the world. No public service can afford to be static. You have to continue to build the capacity of the public servants every minute. Some weeks ago or some few months back, now when they want to appoint permanent secretaries, they get my organization involved for background checks and what have you. And part of the preliminary assessment that is done is computer literacy. And you will not believe that some people who want to be permanent secretaries cannot use computers. They struggle to use smartphones. Besides making a call and doing text messaging, and maybe being able to use WhatsApp, zilch. They can't do much more. It's really unbelievable. And yet, such a person wants to become the accounting officer of a ministry or an agency. Then there's the general poor perception and attitude to work. People come to work when they like. They may not come to work for months. People would, colleagues will cover up somebody who goes and does a program, travels abroad on holidays, and they just come back. When I resumed at ICPC, for example, and I was taking stock of the personnel, there was a lawyer that hadn't been at work forever. But somehow somebody was filing extension of leave so that the person would take annual leave. When the annual leave, then they would take one funny leave, maybe it's a medical leave, and then they would take another. Somebody was religiously submitting those papers. And somebody, up to some point until I resumed, was endorsing those things. Until I heard the rumor that this person was in England. Her salary was moving. So I set up a panel and we dismissed her and instituted a probe to find out who within the system, how on earth she had been abroad for almost a year, and yet her salary was running. Somebody was covering up for her. Both herself and the person were implicated. Poor reward and punishment system. The system hardly rewards those who do well, and it does not punish those who do wrong. Indeed, aligned to that is the dysfunctional justice and disciplinary system that all the time when agencies and the bureaucracy tries to punish those who misbehave, they go to court, to the National Industrial Court. And for some reason, the National Industrial Court has persisted in giving very perverse rulings, returning them. In my office, we had a staff who initiated his own petition against someone, then invited the person that we have received a petition against you that you did so and so and so and so and so, in order to gratify himself and collect a bribe, which he succeeded in doing. However, the person protested and we found out, and I had him dismissed. He went to court and the court said, we didn't give him X notice, even though we followed all the rules. He appeared before the panel and all that, found some lame excuse and said we should reabsorb him. I told him pointedly and his lawyer that we were not going to reabsorb him. I appealed, and the case is on appeal. I said, we will go all the way to the Supreme Court. I will play the game against you as well. But this is just one example. Many agencies experience similar things, and such people become bad examples and bad motivation for others who are doing wrong to say, if this person did it and got away with it, I will do and get away with it. Inadequate funding of ministries, departments, and agencies, this is perennial. And then, of course, intra-ministerial role conflict between political appointees and core civil servants. You have situations whereby people who are appointed, who come into the system, say, we are from the presidency. Our party is in government. But the core civil servants have ways by which things ought to be done, like procurement processes. Politicians want to dominate procurement process and break all the rules. But the rules say you must advertise, shortlist, get the least responsive bidder, ensure that government gets value for money. But some people want to impose, and there's always conflict within the role players. The next slide. Nigeria's leadership profile. When you look at this leadership profile, you cannot but come to the conclusion that there's been some leadership deficit over the period. Next slide. Nigeria has been particularly not fortunate to have committed and competent leadership as foundation of governance. There have been in and out, and there have been varying levels of competencies, as I've said. Nigeria's leaders since independence have displayed varying levels of competency in delivering good governance and positively shaping the public service towards managing resources for the good of everybody. This has become a challenge. So you find a situation that it is not necessarily those who are politically popular that are necessarily the best leaders. But then that is the way the system goes. The Bible says the race is not to the swift, nor yet battle to the strong or food to the wise, okay? Or men of learning, say time and chance. This plays out very clearly within our system. The best people do not always emerge. And that creates a problem and reinforces the mediocrity of the civil service and vice versa. At the lower levels of governance, that is within MDAs and at subnational levels, prevalent leadership deficit has kept the country on the negative side of governance. So you find out that at the political top, you have presidents and governors and ministers. That's one level. Then even within MDAs, that is the parastatals, who heads them? Do we get the best people to head, say, Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria? Do we get the best person to head NNPC? Do we get the best person to head NIMASA and all that, or Nigerian Ports Authority? These are the questions that are begging. So you find the same problem replicated at the lower level. And then at the inter-subnational level, you have the same deficit within the state and the local governments. Nigeria has not learned to put our best foot forward. And so the best people don't always get the political offices or the appointments. And so you have to live with the deficit that is brought into office by those who occupy. So we're caught in a catch-22 situation of weak leadership and dysfunctional public service at all levels. They have not positively impacted each other. If the public service was very strong, even if you appoint or elect an idiot, they'll be able to mitigate the effect. But because over the year, pari passu, we've not had the opportunity to build a viral public service and to sustain it, it has affected. So you have poor leadership, it impacts on the civil service and vice versa. When leadership appears responsive, the public service is resistant. And where the service attempts to be firm and professional, politically partisan leadership undermines stability. So, for example, there are agencies whereby the leaders get there and they want to make change. They are fit for purpose, they understand the terrain, they are internationally accredited and reputed, but they struggle to make a change because the system is resistant. They don't want them to improve things. When I resumed at ICPC, for example, and all that, people were drifting to work when they liked. So I introduced biometric time and attendance. And we put it somewhere. Within weeks, it was damaged. So I did another one and put a camera where you need to climb up the roof or get a ladder to spoil it, looking at clocking in, and linked it to my office, linked it to all the state offices, so that if you come to work on a monthly basis, I get a report generated to say, in the head office, all these people came to work. The time you came, the time you left, you must clock in and clock out. It changed everything. So sometimes and I make it a point of duty to arrive office before 9 o'clock that we resume as well. You see people quickly park their car rushing to clock in before 9, and they cannot leave before the expected closing time. And if the monthly report is generated, the director of admin must explain why people have been absent. If you are officially away, it is noted. And all of these things are then taken into consideration for promotion, for my benefiting people, nominating people to training programs, to go abroad for professional training and capacity. And I say, I must reward those who are showing promise, not just anybody. It has helped to change the culture of things a little bit, but plenty of challenges still ahead. The lack of synergy and the myriad problems undermines Nigeria's rating in governance measurement tools. All of these things put together is why Nigeria is scoring 102 out of 104, because the presence of mind to cure these things has not been found. Very quickly, I look at the cost of governance. Next slide. The cost of governance remains a major challenge for Nigeria. Sometime last year, my office, again, because part of our statutory mandate is to look at is to enforce, to prevent, and do public education. We did a program on the cost of governance. It resonated very well across the country because we were looking at the number of people spending almost 70% of the budget. At the federal level, you have the president, vice president, 37 ministers, SCs, SSCs, the National Assembly, 109 senators, 360 reps with their own admin structure, judiciary, and many MDs, many of them that have overlapping functions. At the state level, this structure is replicated, but a unicameral legislature. You have commissioners, governor, commissioners, and then they have SSAs and what have you. Then you have local government, 774 LGAs, chairman, councillor, and all that. Now, you have to budget for all of this. And this abnormality reflects in budget spending, both on the revenue and expenditure sides every year. Even though this is proliferated, I don't have the current figures, but I doubt that all the people that make up federal, state, and local government are more than 10 million. The whole country. That's about 5% of the entire population. Yet, 70% of the budget is allocated to fund what they do, their recurrent expenditure, and to maintain them. Okay? And about 30% of the budget is meant for capital expenditure to do infrastructure. It is capital expending that creates jobs. If we're able to flip this, you will see Nigeria's unemployment problem diminish over a few years. You will definitely feel the impact. But we're spending 70% on salaries, on recurrent expenditure, buying paper, toner, telephone, electricity, and what have you, for 5% or less of the population, and spending 30% on the remaining 90-something% of the population who depend on the capital budget in order to create jobs. So this is the aberration that we're struggling with. And a significant portion of that 30% of capital budget is still lost to mismanagement, diversion, and corruption. So the 30% of this year's 11 trillion budget, 30% of that will go to capital expenditure. And out of that 30%, some rascals will mismanage some of it for projects that are not critical. Some of it will be diverted to other issues like traveling, DTA, committee allowances, and some will be outright corruption. Now, most of this 30%, again, goes to the privileged 5% of the population who already took 70% of the budget as their remuneration. So you find out that the people who are earning the 70% as their remuneration, they want to dominate who gets the contracts for the 30%. If it's not their children, their family members, it's their friends, it's their cronies. So at the end of the day, it is still the same 5% privileged few who decide how the 30% that is meant for the others gets spent. Next slide. Corruption in revenue and expenditure sides of governance. This is a major challenge. The corruption that is undermining the ability of the country to move forward afflicts both sides of money that is expected as revenue, because government does projections, and when the revenue is received and distributed, how it is spent. There remains a lot of diversion of government revenue by revenue generating agencies. There are some agencies of government that are largely revenue generating. That's the way every system runs. They are called revenue generating agencies. And the Fiscal Responsibility Act obliges them to get incentive allowance in order to motivate them to work very well. And when they work very well, revenue goes up. So, for example, NNPC, for example, Communications Commission, for example, Inland Revenue Service, for example, Ports Authority, for example. So these are agencies that, if they work very hard, all of the leakages in revenue will be blocked. Government revenue would improve. And in order to encourage them, they get incentive allowance. SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. But unfortunately, what happens is that, first of all, many of them under-report revenue. Secondly, when they enhance the revenue that is raised, they create allowances for themselves to earn more. Or they are able to spend more money on travels to get ESTA code or digital allowances. So they illegally raise their own remuneration and allowances and all that. So that rather than the money going to government, a lot more of it goes to their pocket. They misapply the revenue to non-essential procurement. They will just look and say, okay, we will buy iPads for all directors. Meanwhile, last year, all directors got smartphones. It's not even the job of government to be buying phone or iPad for them. But then, in order to spend the money that is available, the money that could have been diverted to health or education and what have you. Then you have the inflation of contracts and the falsification of records to utilize extra earnings. Given this phenomenon, government sometimes will then also under budget for agencies that, for example, earn some revenue. So, for example, academic institutions, educational institutions, government does not fund universities well because government believes that universities raise revenue that they don't declare or fully account for. And so, if the university says we need 10 billion to function, this government will give them like 50% of that or less, with the belief, instead of insisting that account for the revenue that you have earned. Then we have the abuse of appropriation within ministry and extortion of MDAs under the supervision of ministry. So a ministry of justice, for example, besides abusing its own appropriation, all the parastatals under the Ministry of Justice, like NDLEA, NAPTIP, Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, Copyright Commission, they can sometimes be arm twisted to support something that the ministry is doing to the detriment of their own priorities. To the detriment of their own priorities, you have this subtle arm twisting and bullying that goes on. Then add to that a greedy and unethical legislature that fleeces and arm twists MDAs through commercial motions. Amongst the legislature, they have what they call commercial motions, whereby you raise an alarm that, yes, we're going to investigate blah, 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 one sector of the economy or one ministry. And because those ones have something to hide, they will come scurrying to play the game and all that. Endless and sometimes unproductive public hearings, the outcomes of which nobody even sees. Some are productive, I admit, but in the majority of cases, hardly. The legislature will then say, oh, we submitted our report to the executive. We don't control what the executive does with it. But at the end of the day, the reason for the public hearings and the motions is not entirely altruistic. Then you have the hostaging of political appointees by staff of MDAs, especially permanent secretaries, directors of finance, and the heads of protocol. Many people who get elected or appointed as political appointees, some have never worked in the public service before. Maybe they've been in the private sector or whatever. When they get appointed, they are immediately held hostage by people who call it their favor and say, oh, you see, you are entitled to this. We don't have a budget for a new vehicle for you, but we will find a way around it. They buy a new vehicle for the guy. Then the guy has just come to Abuja. He has no house in Abuja. Government says they have monetized his accommodation. So government expects him to go and rent a place. The ministry people will come and say, you will not be able to settle down. They will rent a place using money. And usually what they do is this core of people, they hold the ministerial appointee or political appointee hostage for their own corruption. They are going to be corrupt in his name later on. And we have a case that we investigated at ICPC that we're prosecuting now, whereby the DFA did this to the minister. The minister was appointed. Before you say Jack Robinson, they gave him a brand new car. But the DFA bought two. He bought one brand new one for himself, put it in his hometown. He bought a brand new one for the minister. So shut the mouth of the minister. Rented an apartment for the minister and furnished it, contrary to the rules. And then made the minister generally comfortable, but then helped himself generously. When we started investigating, we discovered all of these anomalies. We arrested him and invited the minister. And when the minister came, he was stupefied. When we showed him, and we said, you have to return all the money. So we took all the furniture and all the things that were bought for the minister and returned it to government to be sold and the money put back in government coffers. The DFA, of course, in the course of the investigation, he passed on, but we recovered as much as we could, including seizing the vehicle and other things that he diverted. This is exactly a typical example of how it happens. The minister gets sorted out, or the political appointee gets sorted out. He asks no question. He's comfortable, but for every 1 naira the still in your name, they will still 10 naira for themselves. Then you have wasteful expenditure in the size of Nigeria's delegation to international meetings generally. Nigeria is generally notorious for having the largest delegation to meetings. And this is a reflection of the very poor pay in the public service, because public servants try to augment their meager salary by unnecessary and irrelevant travels, both within and without, locally and internationally. Sometimes they would even pay themselves for travel days. That has been cancelled now. Days that you are in the custody of the airline, they will pay. You earn extra code for sitting in an airplane, whereas the airline is already taking care of you and all that. So these are examples of situations whereby money is wasted. And some of you might have read the letter that was written by Justice of the Supreme Court against the immediate past CGN on traveling with his spouse and children and domestic servants, all on the ticket of government. This is a typical example of how the expenditure side of governance gets impacted. Then, of course, you have allocation for unofficial weekly trips of some politicians to their own base. They say they must stay connected to their constituency, and the government pays for it. And the line officers orchestrate it so that once this guy is able to visit his town or village, whether or not he goes or he doesn't go, they appropriate some money. He doesn't even ask for accountability. He looks away at what they do and is not able to enforce leadership. So, what is the country doing to deal with all of these challenges? Everything I've said, the country is aware of is a problem, and in fairness, has tried to take some steps to mitigate. Because it is realized that without a virile public service, it doesn't matter how ethical the leader is, you cannot deliver on good governance. And so the public service is partially conscious of its own failures and has an ongoing reform program. And my institution is part of that reform program. The phases of the reform program is as indicated, although the chances of meeting these timelines is, in my view, very remote. Phase one is reinvigorating the public service to reinvent itself. That phase ended in 2020 and was definitely badly impacted by COVID. So there's been a review. Phase two, of course, is the phase of transformation, which was supposed to run from 2020 to 2025. More capacity building, a reassessment of capacity gaps, and all that. And the third phase, of course, is for the public service to be able to compete with its peers world class. Now, of course, the strategy is to build on 4 pillars of institutional and governance environment, improving it, improving the socioeconomic environment, that's better pay and what have you, improving public financial management reform, ensuring that there's value for money and we block wastages, and improving the civil service administrative reform to make sure that discipline is restored and the quality of the service is enhanced. Now, at the moment, there's no concrete evidence that this trajectory is on course and that we can meet these goals. As I said, there are excuses that can be used for not meeting the goals, but both the reasons are both internal and external. I'm trying to rush through. What are the quick wins and some of the things that have happened as part of the reforms of the system? The use of technology successfully in some areas. The introduction of the Government Integrated Financial Management Information Systems, otherwise called GIFMIS, through which all payments are made electronically and we can see what is allocated to each ministry on an electronic portal. The digitization of the payment of salaries, called IPS, Integrated Personnel Payroll Information System, which is through which to eliminate ghost workers. Even though the system is vulnerable and we have seen it is vulnerable, we've made recommendations to government and some reform measures are ongoing. But there's no doubt that IPS has helped to reduce the phenomenon of ghost workers. IPS is vulnerable, it's not 100% foolproof, but it has improved things. One of the matters of contention between the university lecturers and government is that they do not want to get on IPS. They want to be on another electronic platform, which they call UTAS, University transparency and accountability or something like that. I forget the full name now. But there's no doubt that sooner or later, if we don't migrate all public servants onto a digital portal, we're only deceiving ourselves. We'll be paying people, and some people will be earning 2-3 salaries, or we'll be paying ghosts. They'll be diverting some of it. Then you have the Treasury Single Account, which centralizes the receipts of government revenue. Before, different agencies had various accounts, to the extent that some people served their time as heads of agency and they were still in charge of some of the agency's accounts. They have left government, but when they were there, they opened account, they were signatories, they never handed over. So President Buhari, one of the first major things he did was to enforce the Treasury Single Account. And there's no doubt that it has enhanced and improved government revenue. In the first few, maybe the first 2 or 3 years of his first term, the Treasury Single Account recorded over 6 trillion, which were scattered in accounts that were hidden in collusion with the banks. Then, of course, finally, you have the Open Treasury Portal, whereby any payment above a particular amount is put on the portal. I think it's above 5 million is put on the portal so that we can see it, the civil society can see it. Those of you who are in diaspora can even log in to the Open Treasury Portal and see what payments are being made. Of course, civil servants cleverly would drop below that threshold and pay just beneath it in order not to be caught. But ICPC investigates quite a number of these things, and periodically we invite people to explain payments that we have seen on these digital portals. There's no doubt that these 4 have enhanced our ability to investigate. Then we have some improvements in systems and processes for service delivery that reduces human interface. A good example is JAMB, that whereby students who do JAMB now, everything is online. You go and pay online, you get your PIN number online, everything is online. Same thing with the Abuja Geographic Information Systems. These are to reduce the interface of human beings, which is where the corruption begins, to digitize the process and reduce the opportunity and the preponderance of corruption. Then there's been some fiscal reforms, both on the revenue and the expenditure side. On the revenue side, for example, there's a stronger application of the Fiscal Responsibility Act on selected revenue-generating agencies, whereby not only are they given targets, they are specifically and specially audited. And there is a process and systems audit going on as we speak. Then, of course, the expenditure side, for example, ICPC's constituency and executive tracking of projects. When government allocates money to say, okay, build a school, before nobody was checking. So on paper, the school is built, the money is spent. Since nobody went to check, a few years down the line, the same thing can feature again in the budget, build the school, because nobody is checking. So what ICPC does now, since I resumed in 2019, we get the budget, we break it down, we analyze the projects that have been situated across the country, put it on our website for the public, for people to know what projects are due to their areas, and then we select randomly the ones that we're going to track, and I put people on the field. As we speak, we've tracked about 880 projects early this year. We're going to track over another 1,000 in the next few weeks. My people are doing the background work to hit the field in the next few weeks. This way, we track projects that have been abandoned, where the money was paid, the project was not done at all. We get the contractors back to site, and the recalcitrant ones get prosecuted. But needless to say that since it started, we have had completed across the country over 500 projects that we forced contractors back to site. In fact, it could be double that. And we've had projects worth over 300 billion or more completed as well. Then you have reforms around human capital. As I said, the challenges I've enumerated are quite known to people and to government. So there is a quantity and personnel verification exercise going on across the entire country at the moment. Part of which is that staff officers, public servants will submit all of their credentials. And it is believed that the next leg will be to verify the authenticity of the qualification and the certificate. ICPC currently, for one ministry, which I will not name because we're still working on it, we received 37,000 requests, certificates that we should verify. And we've done about 20%, about 50%, and found about 8,000 certificates were fake. Of course, we've asked that all those people should be sacked. We would symbolically prosecute some because we don't even have the capacity to prosecute all of them across the country. But this is just one ministry. And that tells you exactly what I'm talking about and what we're dealing with. And then, of course, there are moves to improve recruitment. Recruitment is one major angle through which a lot of anomalies also happen. Early this year, my office did a roundtable on improving recruitment, a policy dialogue, beg your pardon, on improving recruitment, because recruitment is so opaque, sometimes it's not open, and it forms an avenue for the wrong kinds of people to be employed for the wrong kinds of reasons. So far, government has put an embargo even on recruitment, and the process has been sort of streamlined and made somewhat tighter for you to get approvals to recruit. The next slide. Leadership and personal ethics. At the end of the day, the responsibility for control and oversight and performance of the service is with the leaders, whether political leadership or senior public officers. And the ability to deliver good governance, it starts with your own personal principles. If you go into public office without your own personal ethos, you will conform very, very easily because you have nothing guiding you. And this is a major challenge. The character of the holders of political leadership and the character of the senior public officers also shapes how they respond to the character of government and the system that they have gotten into. It enables leaders to get the responsiveness of the public service, to critically analyze trends, to guide policy formulation and implementation of programs towards good governance. If you don't have your own personal ethos that will guide you, lines you will not cross, things you will not do, you become conformable to anything goes. The absence of personal ethics makes the leaders quickly vulnerable to the failings of their ecosystem. It weakens the ability to hold subordinates accountable for performance or censure corruption, and it hinders the ability to deliver good governance to the people or fulfill constitutional mandate. Let me give you a quick example. The head of one agency that I know, when he was appointed, he had to take an official trip abroad. In order to compromise him, his officers told him that his extra code was $900 per day. Having been in public service at another level some years before, he knew that there was something wrong with this offer. And they brought him something. He asked for a circular or something validating what they said. So they brought him something. But he was not persuaded that it was true. So he didn't collect the money. He borrowed money from his son, who was in diaspora, to take his trip. So when he came back, he then contacted government himself and said, look, I need to know what exactly is my entitlement. What are the rules? And lo and behold, it was not anything near 900. It was less. It was $600. So he queried the officers who advised him. And the only reason was to compromise him. So once he goes on that trip and takes that amount of money, first of all, they would not say anything when he takes other trips and takes more money and takes that same amount. They've got him where they want him. He also will not be able to stop them from abusing their position. But because he had his own personal ethics, he said, once it's not clear, I will not take advantage until things are clear. He refused to take the money, borrowed money, took his trip, came back, and then said, now we can investigate this matter properly. Lack of personal ethics will make any leader vulnerable to the failings within their own ecosystem. The test of character arises from very simple, not necessarily big situations. Simple things like, oh, you are traveling from point A to point B. Somebody is paying for your ticket and you take another ticket. Somebody is providing you accommodation. You collect money for accommodation. Small things like this will add up. The last thing is quickly my leadership dilemma example and the case study. So, for example, should somebody who is in public service promote policies that put them at an advantage, but not in the overall interest of the person? So I give some background. that, for example, and many times as leaders, we take these decisions. You are the one who will decide how your budget for 2023 would be like. Okay? If government says we're only going to give you 1 million naira for your capital, and you say, oh, my car is old, you replace your car. Oh, the computer in my office is old. At the end of the day, the leader ends up spending 80% of the budget. He has not done any wrong, but he's not morally upright to allocate more to himself than to those who work with him. So I argue that if you make a law or policy to benefit yourself, that's ad hominem, as you find with legislators making laws to benefit themselves. And just this week, a judge has given a judgment indicating how much judges should earn, being a judge in her own cause. We don't know how the matter will end. Yes, judges deserve improved pay, but is this the best way to go about it? What if other groups of public servants approach the court? Lecturers can go to court and say a professor should earn 10 million. Will the court not be forced to give judgment because they have given one in their own favor? Exit packages for governors and exit packages for some board members who will make new rules when they are there to benefit themselves without following general guidelines made by government. The use of selfish policies and laws will benefit ethical and unethical leaders. So if, for example, somebody makes those laws, somebody who is ethical, who comes into office, would also benefit, but the law has not been made in the best interest of the community and economic realities. So the question is, should an ethical Christian or Muslim opt out of making or benefiting from such policies or laws, even when it is clearly their duty to make the policy or law? Sometimes you have to take a hard knock and take a decision. What are your options? Refuse to make the policy because you are going to be the one to benefit. So the judge could have said, we will not entertain this case because I'm going to be a direct beneficiary, or I'm going to entertain this case, but I'm not going to prescribe. I'm going to direct those whose duty it is to improve the welfare of judges to do so without giving them specific prescription. I'm going to make the policy, but defy its application after my tenure so that I will not be said to be benefiting from it. I'm going to approve the benefit and make the decision public for transparency's sake so that it will be clear that I was not trying to arrogate any benefits to myself, and this is the decision that has been taken. Accept the benefit and, where possible, apply it to public good. And say, okay, this benefit is good, is plenty. I'm going to put it to a charitable purpose. Like one of the delegates who collected money from the primaries and went back to his constituency and went to distribute it and said, well, this is the money they paid us to vote for one person or the other. I'm not going to spend it for myself. Reject the benefit, but note that this will not stop others from taking the benefit once it is legally made. Collect the benefit and apply it to the needs of the poor while advocating a more sustainable approach. Refuse the benefit and explain why you are refusing. Challenge the unethical benefit in court. In the ultimate analysis, if it is not illegal, the leader has not done wrong. The leader has not done wrong, but you have to wrestle with your conscience and the morality of that decision. And it's not an easy road to walk. The second quick example, which is a bit more straightforward. Supposing a department, say in an academic institution, in a church or whatever, has been given 10 million in the budget and approved projects, including a brand new car for the head of department, a staff bus for junior staff, or capacity building for middle-level officers. The head of department has an ethical dilemma. If he approves a car for himself, he's the direct beneficiary. So the test should be that we should not be selfish. But supposing he doesn't have a car to use at all, if it is legal, even though it confers a direct benefit, it is not sane or unethical. But the others will look at you as selfish. The staff, junior staff who have no boss, and the middle-level officers who will not get trained. In order to set a good example, it's always better to concede to others rather than taking advantage. My concluding thoughts, very quickly. What should be our leadership criteria? First is that the people must decide and select the leader they want. As the saying goes, the people get a leadership that they deserve. It is the character of who we are that will determine and decide the kind of leaders that we will get. If we reject the right kind of leader, then we will pay the consequences. There's a scripture in the book of Judges, a parable, when the forest wanted to choose a leader. Different kind of trees were offering themselves, including the bramble that has thorns and all that. And when the people chose the wrong leader, the thorns punished them. The summary and the message is that if you choose the wrong kind of leader, you will pay the consequences and you will pay the price. To use one scriptural example, in choosing a leader, Israel went to David where he was in Hebron as a fugitive, and they made him a leader. I said, we, all the elders of Israel, have come to King David. They made a covenant with him. They said, in the past, Saul was king over us. You are the one that led us. And the Lord said to you, you shepherd my people, become their ruler. So they had a covenant, a social contract with David. And David had a manifesto. The Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23, in summary. David had minimum criteria for leadership. First of all, knowledge of God, visionary and exposed, able to provide for the people, compassionate and caring, ethical and not lacking in integrity, bold and courageous, sacrificial and ready to serve and to die. This is the key point. These are my closing thoughts for the kind of leadership. The big question is, are we close to or are we far from it? I want to thank you for having the time to listen to me. I'll be happy to take some questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Because of time, we're going to take just a couple questions. So if you have questions, you can just begin to raise your hand and I'll begin to just delegate. Yes. We'll start with Sam. If you could unmute your mic and ask your question. I saw your hand go up first. If you wanted to ask a question.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful presentation. And I pray that you continue to flourish in your chosen career in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Sir, looking at the complexity of our nation, Nigeria, and since your appointment since 2019, can you please help us to juxtapose the level of achievement with the current status of corruption in Nigeria, if there's any paradigm shift, and which way forward for Nigeria, if there's any paradigm shift or no? What hope do we have for the future of Nigeria? God bless you, sir.
I would like to take all the questions at the same time so I can just give one response, because I think I spoke for too long. I apologize.
Okay.
There's one hand raised. I think I saw a hand raised.
Yeah.
City
Samuel.
of David, Sydney.
Yeah. Good morning, sir, and thank you for blessing us this way this morning. I'm in the morning where I am. I'm from Canada. It appears that, well, I listened to everything you've been teaching us on and, saying to us, but it appears from the outside that you talked a lot about prosecution, but it appears a lot that there are little or no prosecutions at all, because I want to believe that if these prosecutions are real and if they are really there, even the whole thing should have been reduced by now, at least. Of course, there is corruption in every country, even in Canada, everywhere there is corruption, but the corruption in other places are not to the point of, taking everything away, everything even basic from people and like that. So it appears as if in Nigeria, for example, in Canada, there was a time that our prime minister here was given money to, they call them We Charity, which had been paying his wife and I think mother-in-law as well, hosting them as guest speakers, and they've been benefiting from that. It was a huge thing because all the questioning and everything was on TV for every Canadian to see, except if you are not interested. So it appears as if, for example, the case of Babachi Lawa, for example, either it is true or not, is even coming on TV these days to even talk. The person that should, go and keep quiet somewhere. I don't know. I'm sorry to use that word if that's too harsh or something, but he's still part of the policy maker. He's still part of the people, contributing and determining what will go on, even in the polity and all of that. So it appears to some of us, especially like me, as if there are little or no prosecution at all, or maybe those prosecution are just, they said, if your child does something wrong, maybe you just draw the ear and say, hey, don't do like that again. But if it's another person's child, you can do whatever thing to that person and all that. So then you also talk towards the end of your presentation that, the people choose, we choose the kind of leader we deserve or something like that. But I feel also it's unfortunate. I was part of the people that was thinking in 2015 that this president that is there now would make a lot of changes and things like that. But it appears as if it has gotten worse even under him, because now the people are induced to vote. There's rigging going on and everything like that. And he doesn't even do anything. He's just seated there in his office, and sometimes even you expect him to say something. He's not saying anything and all that. So I don't know what, because there was a time I was really following, if I was still in Nigeria then, in fact, while I was serving, ICPC was, one of the organizations I wanted to work in then. And, so then the last thing I wanted to say is about this new election coming right now. With the system that we have in place, I don't know, it's a two-phase question. With the system we have in place already, do you think even if somebody like Peter Obi comes in, will he be able to do something, especially, looking at, I don't know if he's going to have anybody in the House of Rep. We don't know if he's going to have any governor and things like that. And also, do you think he has any chance at all, looking at the process of electioneering in Nigeria, what has been going on, the way they've been doing? Well, I'm sorry, this is just my own opinion. Somebody like Tinubu, for example, now, the man is a good election rigger, for example. This is just my own opinion anyways. So what are the chances of somebody like Peter Obi? You understand the system at least much more than somebody like me, for example. So I would like you to say some things to that, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Is there any other questions? So for it's answered all at once. Anyone just want to raise their hand?
There's a chat message in the chat box.
Okay. Yes, I don't know if you can. Is that a question or? I don't know.
Is that all? Should I respond now?
Yeah, I think the one.
It's not a question per se. You can go forward.
It's not a question. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
You can answer the questions now, sir.
All right. Thank you very much for the two interventions. The first one is about the levels of achievement. Is there a paradigm shift at all in the fight against corruption? My response is mixed blessings. Things have not remained the way they were. However, we have also found out that a lot more had been going on before that we didn't even know was there. Sometimes if you use media reports alone, without more, as a barometer for gauging the temperature of an issue, you may be misled. Why do I say so? The media will focus on what a government says it will do. So if the next government says it is going to make sure that Nigeria has electricity, you'll be surprised that within 1 year, you will know everything that is wrong with the electricity sector. The media will focus intense attention on it. So one of the things we found is that there's a lot of reportage of corruption, but not because we're making no impact whatsoever. It is a subject of interest to the government. And I have two surveys to back up my position. We have Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index that most people look at and listen to. And we have the UNODC and Nigerian Bureau of Statistics survey, both for 2017 and I think 2019, on experiential corruption, and the Transparency International is perception. For both the UNODC MBS survey, which are the respondent category of over 30,000 respondents, they personally said they experienced less corruption in dealing with areas and sectors of the public service. Okay? But you see, once people rely only on media reportage, it is important, I'm not discountenancing it, you will not get the actual truth of the matter. So that's why I said mixed blessings. The reduction in bribery or what have you is marginal. It's not significant enough for us to start clapping and celebrating, but there's been a little shift. That's one. But the other point is that, just as the Bible says that by the time the prince of Persia was dealt with, the prince of Greece came. Once you deal with one issue and lift it off the ground, you'll find what it was hiding and covering. As we unravel one area or sector, we find that much more had been hibernating that we were not even looking at before. That's been my experience, for example. So my response is that the level of achievement is mixed blessing. Now, for a paradigm shift, is there a paradigm shift? Even I am not fully persuaded. And the reason and how I have responded is that, you see, unless there's behavior change, I don't think we can get the full paradigm shift that we want. People will simply innovate towards sidetracking the enforcement measures and the system. And Nigeria is not alone, even though we are very heavily reported. Nigeria is not alone in this experience of resistance to change. Indeed, one of the things I'll be doing, I said earlier on in this meeting that I'm traveling. I'm going first for some meeting in a part of Europe to discuss measures that we have taken that have been evaluated and have been well rated, but hardly reported. The second, of course, second part of my engagement is to look at new measures towards having paradigm shift and behavior change, because certain methods like enforcement is not working well enough. And that takes me to the next point, that there are no prosecutions happening in Nigeria. Not true. In my office, we have about 400 active cases going on. About 400. Don't forget, the standard is, first of all, the criminal justice process that we are running and our adversarial system is proof beyond reasonable doubt, presumed innocent until proven guilty. So even if you saw the fellow shooting someone dead, you still have to process them through the courts and show that they shot someone dead and the person died. If they shot someone dead and some people, while the law enforcement is trying to arrest the perpetrator, the corpse was moved by some people and we can't find the corpse, they say, where is the dead body? So we have a system whereby to fight corruption and prosecute it is not just the responsibility of the law enforcement agency. We have our own weaknesses and faults, and I admit them publicly. But you have also the role of the defense and the lawyers, and you have the role of the courts. As I said in this presentation, the rules say that courts should prioritize corruption cases and do everything to complete them. But we find situations whereby the courts will deliberately adjourn a corruption case that will spend a lot of money bringing witnesses to court. The defense lawyer will give some lame excuse not to continue. On a date that they fixed, the court would agree with them. Our witnesses go back, sometimes disillusioned. The adjournment, when you come to the next 9 months, it may not even go on. The judge knows he's going to retire in 9 months. So there are many things that we face. So I admit that there are things, challenges facing prosecution, but it is not as if that there are no prosecutions going. The system is dysfunctional
I gave you the example of the investigation of the certificate forgery. We found about 8,000 implicated. We can't prosecute 8,000. It's not possible. I have about 100 and something lawyers. The entire staff strength in my office is about 800 and something, close to 900 across the entire country. And you must put investigators on the road. You must put prosecutors. The cases must be filed where the offenses were committed. I don't even have the budget. I don't even have the budget. So one of the things that we have done recently is to escalate our measures on asset recovery, which is an internationally recognized enforcement measure. When you succeed in denying the perpetrator of corruption of a life of luxury using the proceeds of crime, even though they are not in jail, there is still a measure of victory. So we have achieved quite a lot on asset recovery. And as far as Sub-Saharan Africa is concerned, Nigeria is the only country that is achieving anything in this regard. We get the feedback all the time from international meetings, from requests. In next month, I've been invited by Interpol to join a group of people to be training law enforcement, anti-corruption agencies from Zambia to say, how is Nigeria doing it? Yet, those of us who are on the field in Nigeria, we know that we're struggling and swimming against the tide. But some other people can see some of the modest achievements. So it's tough. There are prosecutions going on. Not enough, I admit, because the infrastructure, the personnel, the capital is not available. And the system is outrightly hostile. There are people who would want to maintain the status quo. But despite that, we will have to keep at it. The last intervention and question, which is highly political, and I'm not going to be answering, is whether or not I think Peter Obi can win. I will not answer that question, I'm sorry, because I don't want my view. I'm aware that this program is not only public, it's being streamed live, and that will become news. ICPC chairman says, so I'm not going to respond to that. Secondly, whether or not you can survive, both angles of the question are linked, and I'm not going to get into that controversy because of my position as a public officer, and my views always make news, and I have to be careful about expressing those views in this circumstance. I want to thank you for listening to me and for the questions and the comments. Thank you very much. God bless.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for that. I'm just quickly going to pass it over to Pastor Ayobami. Pastor Ayobami, just to share with us quickly, just for about 5 minutes, because of time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Pami. Very nice to meet you. Thank you so much, everybody, for the opportunity to speak very quickly. First of all, I just really want to say a big thank you to you, Professor Balaji. Also, thank you so much, because I met you first at the SPPG, which I'm hoping you'll back me up for a few words after I speak here very quickly. It was a real privilege to listen to you then, and it's also been such an insightful session with you today. So thank you so much for that. I wrote a few words down just before the session, just to prepare what I was going to say. And so instructively, a lot of them have been so connected to what you've said today. So I'm really grateful for that connection that we've had. And what I just wanted to say very quickly was just the fact that I wrote 5 things down I wanted to share. And it's just as simple as this. I believe that Nigeria's progress is very much dependent on the rate or speed of reform, which is something that sort of strikes from what you've said. And reform is dependent on improvements that we make in governance, of course. And governance is tied in itself to the quality of our leadership. And leadership is down to the character, the competence, and the capacity of individuals who stand for office. And that's what we're looking for, people who stand in integrity and people who are able to do and channel energy into leadership in our nation. And we must be, I believe, those individuals who rise up to the challenge. And that's what I feel that I just wanted to share today. But the question is, how do we do that? How do we actually rise up to that challenge and fulfill good leadership for Nigeria. And that's why I wanted to recommend an experience I had, which is what I just mentioned just now, where I first met Professor Bolaji. And it was at the SPPG, the School of Politics, Policy and Governance, which was an initiative that came out of the Fixed Politics Initiative in Nigeria. And it's an unconventional school, with an unconventional vision to essentially create, over the period of 5 years, 5,000, new, disruptive leaders who are going to support in the process of turning our political machinery around. And it's, staffed by over 140 plus world-class faculty. You all heard Professor Bolaji Owosonoye today as he's spoken, and you can tell the quality of individual that he is in the work that he does and the integrity on which he stands, which is something that I hold very dear. So thank you again for that, sir. And essentially, this cohort of leaders who help to support the SPPG, activists, private sector leaders, public sector leaders, like we've heard today, are just people who help, to bring the message that Nigeria can indeed be a nation that can be an example, that can turn around and really make a difference in the world. For me, that experience was really transformational. I had the privilege of being part of the pioneer cohort of the SPPG. And I also had the great privilege of graduating as the top student in that class, really something that I hold very dear, but also I give God all the glory for. So it's something that I would highly recommend to you. The knowledge that you will gain, the networks that you create, the expertise, the experience, everything is just top notch. And today we heard a lot about the questions of ethics, integrity, and corruption and all that in Nigeria. And there's a particular thematic area in the SPPG curriculum about politics, ethics, and leadership, which is, highly recommended. In addition to that, some people here might be interested in the fact that I had the privilege of doing my MBA at the University of Cambridge. And the thesis I did at the end of my MBA as my individual project was around how can Christian churches help in the fight against corruption in Nigeria. And for me, it's an area of passion and how we can stand as people of integrity to actually make a difference. And so I just really wanted to recommend the School of Politics, Policy and Governance. I did it over, it's a virtual school. So, you don't have to be in Nigeria to attend, and definitely something that you can do alongside work, as I did. And so I really just wanted to say, if you are looking for what the next steps are, what do we do next? Just go to www.thesppg.org. Thank you. Someone has just put up the logo and of the School of Politics, Policy and Governance there. So thesppg.org. Get some more information, from the website, and definitely see what you can avail yourself of. I also want to take the opportunity very quickly to just thank Dr. David Akomolafe for the opportunity to say these few words. Thank you so much, sir. God bless you. And thank you for everyone who's been involved on the platform today. And Professor Bolaji, thank you again. I'm sure that you might just want to drop one word. I know you're rushing to the airport about your SPPG involvement. And I really just want to say thank you, sir. God bless you. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olunloyo. It's quite a surprise to see that we have someone in the meeting room who has the SPPG pedigree. I definitely endorse 100% what you have said about the SPPG. It is one of the initiatives, few initiatives that I tend to be part of as my own contribution to fixing what I see as a problem for our country. I'm proud to be a part of that world-class faculty, and I fully endorse your recommendation. Indeed, I encourage everyone in the meeting room who wants to broaden their perspective on this whole thorny issue of leadership to register for the program. It's been designed in such a way not to interfere with your daily routine. It's at a great cost to whatever we do, but one is proud to do it as a contribution to certain roadmaps. And all things being equal, I guess it's good to be a contributor to getting us to where we all want to be and to seeing the kind of Nigeria that we want to see. That dream itself we will fully achieve when people learn not just from SPPG, but choose to apply the SPPG standards and principles in their public and private lives and throw their hearts into the ring and decide not to do it the way that it's been done, but to innovate in new ways. So thank you, Mr. Oluloyo, for this. I fully endorse your position.
Thank you so much, sir. God bless you, and safe trip as you travel.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Dr. Akomolafe and the entire leadership of this initiative for inviting me to be a part of your conversation. God bless you.
Amen. Thank you. I'll just call Pastor Carl Shipley just to help us do the vote of thanks before we round up.
Praise the Lord. Professor Bulagi, I hope I didn't spoil your name in my pronunciation. We want to say thank you, Lord. Thank you very much. It has indeed been a privilege to have been part of this audience. We are very careful that your job is not an easy one. We would like to say thank you for your insightful lecture on the issues of governance in the public service and the plans to correct the system and bring it up to the desired world system. As Christian leaders, we are both obligated to learn from these examples that such do not enter into the church administration. Thank God for the example you use, the man of integrity who double-checked his entitlement and chose to look before leaping, so as not to rob the government. Integrity is so important. Let us remind ourselves and others what God requires of us as men and women of God. I go to Micah chapter 6, verse 8 for this. The Bible says, "He had showed thee, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee?" This is it. "But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." Let us be men of integrity. Professor, we indeed humbled. We thank you for taking time out. I mean, even although you have to rush for your flight, to be with us today and to update us on what you're doing and there to tell us that there is hope. There is hope for Nigeria moving on into the future. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. We're just gonna round up now. We're gonna pause this meeting to a close. Just want to thank everybody for joining once again. Our next meeting will be on the 20th of August. So I believe that is the third Saturday of August of next month. So I want to say thank you for joining. On behalf of the whole LRP team, I say thank you all for joining. Thank you to our guest speakers and everyone who asked questions and chipped in. We all say thank you. God bless you all. So we'll be causing the meeting to a close now. So we pray that you have a fantastic week and that we'll meet again on the 20th of August for our next